All right, new religion, new period of history. Here we go. When you think about Buddhism, it seems like Buddhism comes from a totally separate tradition, but Buddhism is very deeply connected to Hinduism. And obviously, the Buddha himself, Siddhartha Gautama, was born a Hindu. And his opposition to what Hinduism is starts at a young age. In some ways, his leaving his home is a rejection of Hindu Dharma and a complete rejection of everything from stages of life to the gods who would have opposed this as well. And so his rejection of his father in some ways is a revolution, personal revolution for his own individual salvation. So I'm not sure how much you know about Buddhism or what the relationship of Buddhism to Hinduism was. We're going to be talking more about that transition today. Obviously, when we look at Siddhartha and we look at him in Hindu terms, he's a sannyasin. But he's a sannyasin who engages in this stage of life when he's still only in his 20s. So he rejects the early householder phase and goes straight to, look, I don't want to wait a long time. I want to go straight to getting involved in the types of things that would allow me to get to moksha or nirvana. So if you look at Buddhism broadly as a religion, the religion is still highly concentrated in Southeast Asia. That little pink dot off the coast of India looks like a teardrop of Sri Lanka, where I spent a year right after high school. And a heavily Buddhist country. It's interesting because the Buddha was born in northern India, but if you look at India, India is no longer very much a Buddhist country because Buddhism was reabsorbed into Hinduism in many ways. But you'll notice that there are a lot of Buddhists in China, in Thailand, in Burma, into Vietnam, and even down into Australia and the United States too. You're seeing a very large growth of Buddhism in Australia and the United States, particularly amongst highly educated people who see it as an option as they move away from traditional forms of theism. So if you look at the different world religions and how they break down, Buddhism, it says at the top it's 9%. This shows it closer to 6%. The reason that the number is lower in the chart is because the Chinese don't recognize Buddhism as an official religion, and there are many, many Chinese Buddhists, both people who practice Buddhism in a traditional form and those who are more involved in a form called Pure Land, which we'll get to later in the unit. Buddhists are probably closer to 10% than they are to 6%. Not that that really makes a whole lot of difference, but it's a significant portion of the population. Now, what I really want to focus on today is this period called the Axial Age. Now, the Axial Age was a period where tremendous changes in religion and mindset occurred. If you look at this in Greece, it's the rise of Plato, Aristotle, the great philosophers, the great rationalists of Greece, who totally transformed the way we think about so many things. Obviously, we have Buddha, who emerges right in the middle of this, right about the same time that Confucius does in China. And Confucius, as you might remember, was reforming older forms of Chinese legalism and trying to make a religion or a practice that was more communally based and more based in respect for family, respect for towns, and so forth. So if you look at India, you have the early Vedic religions that are beginning to transform into modern Hinduism. So Hinduism also undergoes a kind of reform during the same period. And then, of course, in the Middle East, you have the emergence of Judaism. And Judaism is the emergence of monotheism. So you have all of these transformations. Monotheism is emerging. Hinduism is becoming more defined. Chinese culture is redefining itself. European culture is redefining itself. So huge changes in the way people are viewing themselves. And broadly speaking, although Confucius is kind of an exception to this, there's also an increasing acceptance and belief in individualism, and individualism becomes a big part of what that modern societies are about, and then the religions are going to reflect that. So this gives you, again, this overview of these major religions during this period of time. You just get a sense of how profoundly important this period was. So in the Axial Age, this is Carl Jaspers who writes about the Axial Age, and he just says, at this point, man becomes more conscious of himself. Basically, there's a revolution in consciousness where people realize that they need more help, that they're limited and that they're powerless and they're kind of stuck in things. And so they start asking big questions. In Hinduism, for example, people felt kind of tired of all the old rituals. They didn't understand all the Sanskrit chanting and why it was necessary to sit around a sacrificial fire and continue to give all these offerings all the time, and who are all these gods and why was it important to worship them. So there's a lot of questioning of that, and there's also a lot of questioning of the caste system, which is going to be extremely important. So again, when you begin to get to a more individual sense of things, you're going to start questioning, well, why do I have to be part of the Vaishya caste? Why do I have to be part of the merchant caste? If I'm a merchant, I'm making a lot of money, I'm beginning to develop myself as an individual. So why do I have to do this? Why do I have to sit and be lower down in the caste system? So Buddha is going to reject the caste system, and he's going to reject the gods. And that's going to be a pretty big change in the way religion works in Southeast Asia. So what happens to lead to these changes? Political fragmentation, particularly in northern India. And this happened because of the emergence of not just a commercial class of people, a real upwardly mobile class of merchants who were emerging out of this kind of new capitalism in northern India. As far as the economic basis, there was a big interest in, obviously, if you get more money, you want to have more fun. That's where the leisure comes in. The education also becomes more important. So we need to, as you get more educated, you're going to start asking more questions. And as you ask more questions, you're going to start to question the traditions. And when you start questioning the traditions, you start to reform those traditions. So as you can see, this was happening all over the world, but primarily in the East. So this population growth and intensive economic development is going to be the thing that's going to be driving a lot of these changes in belief. So to summarize, the Axial Age in India, particularly in the northern area, there was just basically a feeling that people were getting tired of the way that the religion used to be. That Hinduism's getting kind of old, and samsara, this idea of just being trapped in endless incarnations. It's depressing. It doesn't give you much agency in it. You can't do anything, right? Let me do something. So as I was saying before, the disenchantment with the Vedic rituals and the yogas are just too hard to do. It takes too much time. And there's just the spiritual malaise basically means that people are just feeling like, they're just not feeling it. So they're trying to find new ways to get to the truth. And Buddha's going to hit that, right? It's going to come to a new truth, a new dharma, a new teaching that's going to be compelling to huge numbers of people. We've talked about the emergence of primitive capitalism, the emergence of individualism, and the beginnings of the strains in the caste system. So what starts happening is as more teachers step in, you have more competition for the students. And as the students begin to ask for more individualized teachings, give me something that's not just kind of a boilerplate teaching, give me something that's more a byproduct of your own experience, so that there's going to be, again, more competition coming out of this period of time. So the movement away from gods, the movement towards more rationalism and skepticism. And it really, if you think about Buddhism, it emerges from a deep skepticism, a belief that things weren't okay and that needed to be questioned. And that begins with the Buddha leaving his family and leaving society and finding his truth on his own. So this interest in transcendence is still there. People are still wanting to get to moksha. They just don't want to have to kind of wait for endless periods of time before this is going to actually happen. So the Axial Age really is a new way of thinking about the world and where we fit in it and how we should live in this rapidly changing world. So if you think about this for a second, the Axial Age is not in some ways all that different from the period that we're living in now. Period where people are really questioning existing institutions, where class divisions and tensions in society are beginning to really transform things. And human beings are looking for alternatives, ways to escape this. And obviously our situation is slightly different historically, but this idea that we're interested in the fate of humanity is not just about what's happening locally, it's about global change. So Buddhism really comes in the middle of all this as a tremendous transformation and an extremely important religion in all of this. And I think in some ways that's why it speaks to modern people. It's in some ways it's the first of the modern religions, if you want to think of it that way. So I want you to think about, I know I've thrown a lot at you. It's a lot of talking and a lot of text. But basically what I want you to think about is how the environment and the society of India in the 6th century BCE really led to Buddhism. And you might want to write down a few thoughts about that.